I'm giving some thought, like if I were to run Darkurthe, which maybe at some point I might do.
I'm beginning to really feel the urge. So yeah, go on.
Yeah. Yeah. Of like, some of the things that I would lean into in order to do that. But, I do think definitely the one great decision that we had was like giving some thought, to where it all begins, and have the players then wouldn't have to learn about all the world, but they would at least want to be aware of what is going on in that area in order to kind of have some ideas about what kind of a character they would be building.
Well, I think this goes back to the essay that I wrote in 2011, Setting an Emergent Story. And it talked a lot about, we're going to start with a game text that gives us this sprawling vista, which may well have millennia of made-up history. And at the very least has, topography. And one of the tricky element there, really, well, even that just goes all the way back to Sorcerer and Sword, which you've been playing, where it says, find a location, say a location. And it even goes further and says, build your map from the locations after you have a few. But the idea here is to try and recapture that as much as possible. We've been handed this big, huge thing. The bad news is that it might be bullshit, in which case we're better off not bothering with thinking of the whole thing anyway and just going somewhere.
Right.
Or it isn't bullshit, but nobody plays a whole setting. You can open a book, an Elric book, and see the map of the Young Kingdoms, but you're not playing the whole setting in the first Elric story. You don't have characters from all walks of life, from all places in the Young Kingdoms in that story. And so, and as I've pointed out in the text of Sorcerer and Sword, it's an excellent example of some fan drawing the map years later, after they have a bunch of stories. So the point, though, I'm getting at is that if you do that, then all of a sudden setting becomes kind of a joy. The studying of the text for setting becomes collective, right? I mean, that's one thing. I mean, it's not, the GM is no longer the tutor, right, of the group, or a professor armed with the textbook, and the students have to kind of like memorize and cram the textbook, for the test. And the test, of course, is pass-fail in terms of whether your character lives or dies, right? And so you no longer have that problem. In our case, Darkurthe is probably not too surprising that it does. I think the setting does pay off as a whole. That there is, a bigger world, a bigger place in which this place sits, and that therefore, even if we did have somebody not from Ilwraith in our game as a player character, their presence as a foreigner actually would matter. It would be interesting. It would be a different game from when it was if it were set somewhere else. But I wanted to contrast it with Legendary Lives, which has that same quality, but who would expect it?
Right.
Right. I mean, Darkurthe looks like it's like that, and you're kind of hoping it's not lying. And Legendary Lives doesn't look like that at all. And then after a little bit, you're like, wait a minute. It makes sense. This, we're going to be right here. With this composition of characters, we're going to be right here. We have Corsairs and, Avians. So we're up here in these islands, And we have a leprechaun or whatever the fuck they are, brownie or something. Well, what's he doing up there? And then you see that's the question. What's he doing up there? Suddenly
Right.
becomes, useful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
The map of Legendary Lives, the world map, it does seem much more kind of crammed in
It
terms
is.
of
It's not very realistic.
right. Along with that, it has all the different races in Legendary, but yeah, they're all kind of like right in this kind of compressed space and kind of bumping up against each other.
The effect is is whimsical for sure. The point is that there's enough there, strange as it is, to pay off in terms of play.
Right.
Right. Now, I'm also now playing Undiscovered. So as you can see, I'm on, this is Heartbreaker year for me, right? I'm happily doing a bunch of them. And Undiscovered is painfully inadequate in the setting department. There's a setting section which is in a font that's half the size of the rest of the book. So clearly it was too big. The book got too big, and so they had to shrink the setting material in font size. So uncharacteristically for a 2000s book, it's got its setting chapter in itsy bitsy, eeny tiny little, itsy script. And you're kind of like, what the fuck? Who possibly would sit here and read? And it's definitely one of these things like 5,000 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Then there was the first cataclysm. Well, and then the peoples of so-and-so moved to here and blah, 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 right? Then the god of such-macallit, had a hissy fit, and then this war happened. Then came the second cataclysm, and you're like, oh, God, kill me now, right? And there's nothing to it. I mean, there's nothing to it. You read through it, and you're like, this does nothing for play. There's nothing in the situations. There's nothing in character creation. There's a map of an empire, and you're like, well, I don't know. There's some politics in there, but really, it's very hard to get behind it. And what your characters would have to do with it is just, I don't know if it's joyously free to interpretation or whether it's just fucking irrelevant. So as you may have seen with the Undiscovered game, I did what I didn't do with either Darkurthe or Legendary Lives, which was basically junk it all. I was only interested in the one character race and their interaction with humans. So that's what we're playing. And we're playing a fantasy setting, which is appropriate for those themes, and everything else is junks. There's no, we don't have the elves of Undiscovered wandering through as NPCs. There aren't any. We don't care. So Darkurthe, I mean, where are you thinking of? Because I know exactly where I would set a game were I to GM one. Or if I weren't to GM it, where I would plead, I would beg. If we weren't going back to Ilwraith, which I maintain is just a gold mine, right, of what on earth a given group would make of Ilwraith. If we weren't there, I know where I would go. So where would you go?
I was, I think I might go with, maybe not completely in the middle of that kind of Middle Eastern setting, but something on the edge of it, like one of the border areas on, that would kind of bring into play some of those.
There's a remarkably positive spin on Arab culture in that book. I mean, if you look at it, the Moors, I mean, he even calls them Moors, for God's sake, right? It's not, he didn't exactly reach far for his terminology. They get all those extra skills. He talks to them as, an educated people. They don't seem to have all these dramatic problems. It's kind of like the Tolkien madness is going on, like taking up half the continent in the east. And then over here on the western edge, these guys are all like having an ordinary human culture with ordinary scholarly religion. I mean, there's the extremists up in the north, the desert tribes and stuff, right? The hardcore fundamentalists, but down here in the coffee drinking lands, we get along fine. And I kind of was wondering, it just was a remarkably a remarkably sane sector of the culture.
Yeah, so I've been kind of thumbing through, but like that, kind of the southern part of that that region,
Sherazade,
where you also then get the Isles of Goth and stuff. There's some kind of like more kind of menacing kind of things right down there in the south as well. But that would be, I think, a fun and rich place.
I completely agree, and it's it's also not very elfy dwarfy, so it's kind of interesting to just play over there. My take would be to go down into Maldor, because there's 2 cities in Maldor, and one is totally the necromancer, not the necromancer kings up in the north, but the death magic warlocks, right? The crazy warlocks, who are only the race order. You have to be a member of the half-elf royal family. But what's everybody else down there? Can you be somebody who dabbles in warlock stuff because it's like around and about in the culture, but you're not actually in that race order? So you might need to come up with a school of warlock magic that's non-official, if you will. And it led me to think a lot, and this is something I've been thinking a lot about for Darkurthe. Okay, you've got the whole idea of the I don't know what the word for it is, but there's a structural box, and they use it for each of the race orders, and they use it for most of the guilds and clans and religions, where you have a box, and each one has required skills. There's a bunch of other shit too, but what really matters is the required skills. Then they have those competency levels. And what competency level means is if you have that value or higher in all of the skills, the required skills, and there's usually only 1 to 3 of them. There's not that many. Then you are now considered at that level, right, of the box. Then you go over to the other column and it tells you what you get at that level. And in the race orders, that's usually powers of some kind. But for the other ones, it's usually just a title, guild master or priest or something. Right. So it's not really, it's a new social role maybe, but it's not like powers and stuff. It's just social advancement status. And that's all. So, okay, you can make up anything you want. You can make up a magical order, like, I don't know, you can make up anything, like a family. And you just pick 3 skills that are important for it. And then you just give names to the hierarchy and you say, okay, I'm a member of this family. That's that's what's most important to my character. And you just, work your way up as you see fit by just putting points into those skills if you want to. And the neat thing about it is that in Darkurthe, it has no other benefits. You don't gain hit points, right? You don't get suddenly a bunch of new skill points out of nowhere. It's a result. It's purely a result of the skill advancement system and nothing else. There's no infrastructure of game mechanics in there unless it's a funky race order where you do get cool ass, or some strange College of Magicians or something, where you do get some strange benefits along the way. But that's fun if you want them.
Right.
But you don't have like a all character rubric for how this thing is supposed to work and how it's rewarded.